It was a quiet Wednesday evening when life at the Parker house shifted in a way I couldn't have predicted. The day had been ordinary work, errands, and the usual busyness that came with running a household. My husband, Michael, was away on a short business trip, leaving just me and his son, Ethan, at home. At 22, Ethan wasn't a boy anymore, but a young man carrying the weight of trying to find his place in the world. I slipped off my shoes by the door and set my purse on the counter, welcoming the silence of the house. That was when I heard the faint trickle of water upstairs. At first, I thought little of it. Ethan often showered after coming home from his job at the cafe, but something about the sound pulled at me. Maybe it was the unusual stillness in the air, or perhaps it was my own restless mind. Climbing the stairs, I noticed the bathroom door was slightly ajar. That caught my attention immediately. Ethan was known for being private, even guarded. An open door while he was inside was strange. I hesitated, torn between retreating and checking in. Just as I shifted my weight, the door creaked. Ethan turned abruptly, startled. His face flushed as he grabbed a towel, his voice shaky. "Oh, I didn't realize you were home," he stammered. I quickly averted my eyes, embarrassed by intruding. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I just heard the water running and thought something might be wrong." He shook his head, his shoulders slumping slightly, the towel clenched tightly in his hands. "No, it's nothing," he murmured, but the tremor in his voice betrayed otherwise. For a moment, the silence between us carried something heavier than words, an unspoken signal that he was carrying more than he could handle alone. I lingered at the doorway, unsure whether to leave Ethan to his privacy or to stay. His face was tense, his eyes fixed anywhere but on me. Something inside me urged me not to walk away. Gently, I stepped into the bathroom and closed the door behind me, softening my voice. "If something's wrong, you can tell me," I said. "I promise I won't judge." For a moment, Ethan froze. His grip on the towel loosened slightly, and he lowered himself onto the edge of the bathtub with a heavy sigh. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "It's kind of embarrassing." I leaned casually against the counter, trying to appear relaxed so he wouldn't feel cornered. "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready," I replied. "But sometimes it feels better when you do." He rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes still avoiding mine. "I've just been dealing with stuff. I don't know who else to talk to." The vulnerability in his words surprised me. Ethan was usually self-reliant, the kind of young man who kept his worries to himself. That he was opening up to me at all felt significant. "It's about me," he continued, struggling to find the words. "Something doesn't feel normal, and I don't know if I'm overthinking it or if there's actually something wrong." I felt a pang of sympathy. "You're not alone in feeling that way," I said softly. "Everyone has questions about themselves at some point. The important thing is noticing when something feels off. Do you want me to help you figure it out?" He glanced up at me then, his expression a mix of hesitation and relief. "You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not," I said, offering a reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out together." As Ethan began to speak, the tension in the room slowly shifted. His words came in fragments, halting at first, as if he had been carrying them inside for far too long. He fidgeted with the edge of the towel, his shoulders tight. I don't know if I'm normal," he admitted, his voice trembling. "It feels like everyone else has it figured out, who they are, what they're doing. And me? I feel lost. Like I don't fit in anywhere." I took a step closer, leaning gently against the sink so he knew I wasn't going anywhere. "Ethan," I said softly, "you're not broken. You're not supposed to have all the answers right now. Nobody your age does, even if they pretend to." He looked up, searching my face for reassurance. "You really think so?" "I know so," I replied firmly. You're just figuring things out. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. For the first time since I entered the room, his posture loosened. His lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though the uncertainty in his eyes still lingered. I've never talked about this before, he admitted. I didn't think anyone would understand. Sometimes we don't give people enough credit, I said with a small smile. You'd be surprised how much they care, if you let them in. But it's also okay to be careful about who you open up to. Not everyone has to know everything. Ethan nodded slowly, his breathing evening out. The guardedness that usually surrounded him began to fade, replaced by a tentative openness. It felt as though he was finally allowing himself to be seen, not just by me, but by himself as well. In that moment, I realized this conversation was more than just words. It was a turning point. Later that evening, I found myself replaying the bathroom conversation over and over. Ethan had trusted me with something he hadn't shared with anyone else. That in itself was huge. But I couldn't shake the feeling that his words carried a weight even he didn't fully understand. The house was quiet, Michael still away on his business trip. Ethan had retreated to his room, and I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, staring at the steam curling upward. My heart was heavy with questions. Had I said enough? Did I really help him, or did I just scratch the surface of something deeper? The next day, the rhythm of the household returned to its usual pace. Ethan went to his part-time job at the cafe, came home, and disappeared into his room. On the surface, nothing had changed. But I noticed little things, like how his eyes avoided mine when we passed in the hallway, or how his shoulders stiffened whenever I tried to start small talk. One evening at dinner, the silence between us was thicker than usual. Michael was still away, and it was just the two of us at the table. I caught Ethan stealing a glance at me, only to quickly look away, his cheeks faintly red. It was a fleeting moment, but it told me something unspoken lingered between us. I wanted to brush it off as nothing, but I couldn't. The quiet tension wasn't just in my imagination, it was there, pulsing beneath every interaction. That night, lying in bed, I realized something important. Ethan wasn't just struggling with everyday worries. He was wrestling with bigger questions, questions about who he was, where he belonged, and what his future would look like. And whether I was ready or not, I had somehow become the person he trusted to help him face it. The following afternoon, with Michael back at work, Ethan and I found ourselves alone in the house again. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for lunch when I heard quiet footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw him standing in the doorway, his posture hesitant, his eyes carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. "Hey," he said softly, almost unsure of himself. I set the knife down and gave him my full attention. "Hey, Ethan. Everything okay?" He shifted uncomfortably, his hands buried in his pockets. I wanted to talk. A small knot formed in my stomach. The seriousness in his voice reminded me of that evening in the bathroom. I gestured toward the table. "Of course. Sit down." He hesitated before pulling out a chair and sinking into it, his gaze fixed on the floor. After a long pause, he spoke. "I've been feeling kind of strange lately. I don't know how to explain it, but something feels off. Like I'm not myself." I walked over and sat across from him, keeping my tone gentle. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? Whatever it is, you don't have to go through it alone." He let out a slow breath, his shoulders sagging. "I just don't know what's happening to me. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere. Like I don't know who I'm supposed to be." My heart ached for him. This wasn't about a simple worry, this was about identity, self-doubt, and growing pains he didn't know how to navigate. I reached across the table, resting my hand lightly over his. Ethan, it's okay not to have all the answers right now. Life isn't about figuring it all out at once. You're allowed to be uncertain. And you're not alone in this, you've got me, and you've got your dad too. He finally looked up, his eyes glistening. I just don't want to be a burden. You'll never be a burden, I said firmly. Not to me. Not to anyone who loves you. The days that followed felt like walking on a fragile bridge. On one hand, Ethan seemed lighter, almost relieved after opening up. On the other, there was still something unsettled in his eyes, like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite put together. I tried not to press him, giving him space, but I also made sure he knew I was available whenever he needed to talk. At dinner one evening, Michael chatted happily about work while Ethan sat quietly, pushing food around on his plate. His responses were brief, almost mechanical. I glanced at him a few times, but his gaze was locked downward, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. When Michael turned on the TV after dinner, Ethan lingered in the kitchen. I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I dried my hands on a dish towel and turned to face him. And? I asked gently. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. I don't know if I'll ever figure out who I am. It feels like everyone else has a map, and I'm just wandering around lost. My chest tightened at the vulnerability in his words. Ethan, it's okay to feel that way. Most people don't have a map, they're just better at pretending. What matters is that you're trying, that you care enough to search for answers. He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. You really think I'll get there someday? I stepped closer, speaking with quiet conviction. I don't just think it, I believe it. And until you do, I'll be here to walk beside you. For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile flickered across his face. The weeks that followed unfolded slowly, like pages turning in a book neither of us had planned to read. Ethan began to open up more, little by little, testing the waters of trust. Sometimes it was small things, how his day went, frustrations at work, or worries about friends. Other times, his words carried deeper weight, questions about purpose, identity, and the uncertainty of adulthood. I could see the effort it took him. For someone so private, speaking these things aloud was no small task. Yet each time he did, something shifted. The heaviness on his shoulders seemed to lift, if only slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. One quiet evening, we sat together on the back porch. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, and the sky glowed with streaks of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the fading light. You know, he began softly, I used to think I had to figure everything out by myself. Like asking for help meant I was weak. But talking to you, it makes me feel like maybe I don't have to do it all alone. His words touched me deeply. You don't, I said firmly. No one does. We're not meant to carry everything on our own. That's why we have family, friends, people we trust. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I guess I just needed to hear that. I keep worrying that I'm falling behind, that I'll never catch up to everyone else. Ethan, I said gently, life isn't a race. Everyone's path looks different. Some people sprint, some people wander, and some people take detours. What matters is that you keep moving forward in your own way. For a moment, silence settled between us, but it wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. The kind of silence that felt safe. I don't know what I would have done without you, he admitted finally, his voice steady but filled with quiet gratitude. I reached over and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. You don't ever have to find out. I'll always be here, no matter what. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, I saw something in Ethan's expression I hadn't seen in a long time, calm. It wasn't that his doubts had vanished, or that all his questions had been answered. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, he looked at peace, like he believed he wasn't as lost as he once thought. The journey ahead wouldn't be simple. I knew there would be more nights of doubt, more moments when the weight returned to his shoulders. But I also knew he was learning something invaluable, that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and that he didn't have to face his struggles in silence. Later that night, after Ethan had gone inside, I lingered on the porch a little longer. The stars began to appear, one by one, against the darkening sky. I thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks, not just for Ethan, but for me too. His courage to open up reminded me of something important. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give another person is simply to listen and stay. As I finally rose to head inside, I carried with me a quiet certainty. Whatever lay ahead, uncertainty, growth, setbacks, and victories, we would face it together. And that was enough.